Dad, I need you to understand something. People at this dinner can decide my entire career, and I cannot have you embarrassing me. My daughter said it while standing at my kitchen counter with one hand wrapped around a cup of coffee and the other resting on a leather presentation folder that probably cost more than the work boots beside my back door. Lauren was 34, successful, ambitious, and dressed for work before 7 in the morning. I was 64, wearing an old navy work shirt with sawdust on one sleeve because I had spent breakfast repairing a cabinet hinge. Apparently, at that particular moment, we represented two worlds she desperately wanted to keep separate. How exactly would I embarrass you? I asked. Lauren looked uncomfortable. That is not what I meant. Those were the words you used. She sighed and glanced toward the clock. This dinner is important. Richard Hale will be there. Evelyn Brooks will be there. Half the people involved in choosing the Riverside team will be there. I cannot spend the evening worrying about what you might say. What do you think I might say? Dad. She gave me the look children use when they believe their parents are deliberately making something difficult. You know what I mean. I did know. That was probably why I did not argue. Lauren had been working at Whitmore and Hale Design Group for almost 9 years. She had started as a junior architect, survived impossible deadlines, earned increasingly important assignments, and developed a reputation for polished presentations. Now she was competing for a design director position, and the Riverside redevelopment could determine whether she got it. I was proud of her. I had always been proud of her. But somewhere during those years, Lauren had begun treating success as though it came with a dress code. My 12-year-old Ford pickup embarrassed her when I parked outside her office. My habit of repairing things instead of replacing them amused her colleagues. The fact that I preferred a neighborhood diner to restaurants where the menu required explanation seemed to confirm something she had gradually decided about me. I belonged to the life she had come from, not the one she was building. Who invited you anyway? She asked. An old acquaintance. From where? A long time ago. Lauren waited, but I did not elaborate. The invitation had arrived 3 days earlier from Evelyn Brooks herself. I had not spoken with Evelyn in years, although I knew her reputation well. She had become one of the most respected developers in North Carolina. Her note was brief and personal. She said several people from the old days would be attending and that she hoped I might join them. I had mentioned it casually because I assumed Lauren would find the coincidence interesting. Instead, her expression changed the moment she realized I might appear in the same room as her senior partners. Please do not take this personally, she said. Tonight is not a family event. It is business. Then you will not have to worry about me. Her shoulders relaxed immediately, and that hurt more than the original comment. Thank you. I nodded. Lauren gathered her things and headed toward the door. Before leaving, she turned back. I know you think I am being difficult. I think you are nervous. I have worked my entire career for an opportunity like this. I know. Then you understand. I looked at her for a moment. More than you realize. She kissed my cheek, apologized again without actually changing what she had said, and left for the office. I watched her silver sedan disappear around the corner before returning to the kitchen. My wife, Margaret, had been gone 6 years. If she had been sitting at that table, she would have told me not to let Lauren's words bother me. Then she would have spent 20 minutes explaining precisely why they should bother me. Margaret had always been better at holding love and disappointment in the same conversation. I poured another cup of coffee and looked toward the garage. Most of my professional life was stored out there now. Drawing tubes. Site photographs. Notebooks. Old drafting tools. A few awards Margaret insisted on keeping after I stopped caring about them. Lauren had seen those boxes hundreds of times growing up. She never asked much about them, and I never pushed. She knew I had worked in architecture and construction design before she was born. She knew I had eventually stepped away from the profession when her mother became ill. What she did not know was how far that career had once taken me. I had made that choice deliberately. I wanted Lauren to build her own reputation without walking into rooms carrying mine. By late afternoon, I had nearly forgotten about the dinner. Then Lauren returned because she had left a charger on the kitchen counter. She rushed through the door wearing a charcoal suit, talking about revised drawings and a last-minute meeting. While she searched her bag, the leather presentation folder slipped from under her arm and landed near my chair. Several printed renderings slid halfway out. I bent down to help her gather them. "I have it," she said quickly. But I had already seen the title printed across the first sheet. For a moment, the kitchen seemed unusually quiet. Lauren took the folder from my hand. "What?" she asked. "Nothing." "You are staring at it." I looked again at the words on the cover. Riverside Exchange Phase 2. I had not seen that name on a professional drawing in nearly 3 decades. Lauren checked the time and hurried toward the door again. "I will call you tomorrow." "Good luck tonight," I said. "Thanks, Dad." Then she was gone. I remained beside the kitchen table, thinking about a collection of old blueprints stored 20 feet away in my garage. Lauren believed Riverside Exchange might make her career. She had no idea it had once changed mine. The next morning, Lauren called before I had finished my first cup of coffee. "You were quiet when you saw that folder yesterday," she said. I looked through the kitchen window toward the garage. It brought back some memories. "You worked around Riverside, did you not?" "Something like that." There was a pause. "I have a meeting in 10 minutes. I will call you later." She did not. Lauren had always known that I worked in architecture before she was born, but children rarely understand their parents as people who existed before becoming mom or dad. To her, my professional history consisted of a few vague facts. I had studied architecture. I had worked for several firms. I understood construction. Then life changed, her mother needed me, and eventually I stepped away. Lauren grew up seeing the version of me that came afterward. I repaired our kitchen cabinets instead of hiring someone. I built shelves in the garage. I drew renovation ideas for neighbors on yellow legal pads and refused payment beyond an occasional dinner or 6-pack of soda. When Lauren was 13, she wanted her bedroom rearranged, so I measured the room and sketched 3 layouts before breakfast. She laughed because I included dimensions for every piece of furniture. When she was 16, she needed a model bridge for a school engineering project. I showed her why her first design would twist under weight, then made her rebuild it herself. She won 2nd place. For years, those moments were simply Dad being Dad. She never asked where I learned any of it. I never thought she needed to. Margaret understood differently. My wife kept almost everything. Newspaper clippings. Professional photographs. Conference programs. Old project books. She once framed an award I had left sitting in its cardboard box for 6 months. "Someday Lauren will want to know," she told me. "Then she can ask." Margaret shook her head. Children do not always know which questions matter until the person with the answers is gone. After she died, I could not bring myself to throw those things away, so I packed them into storage cabinets in the garage. That Thursday evening, Lauren stopped by unexpectedly. She said she needed the laser measuring tool I kept above my workbench. Her firm was sending a team to inspect part of the Riverside property the following morning, and the equipment department had apparently misplaced one of theirs. "Take mine," I said. She followed me into the garage. I reached toward the shelf, but Lauren was looking at an old wooden drafting table against the wall. Several storage boxes were stacked underneath it. "Was that yours?" she asked. "Still is. That thing looks ancient." "Thank you." She smiled. While I searched for the measuring tool, she pulled open one shallow drawer. Inside were mechanical pencils, drafting triangles, scale rulers, and an old compass set. "You really kept all this?" "Your mother did." Lauren picked up a triangular scale. We used these in school for about 5 minutes before everything went digital. Some of us survived the wilderness. She laughed, and for a moment she was not the polished architect worried about who might see her father. She was simply my daughter in the garage where she had spent countless afternoons growing up. Then she noticed one of the cardboard archive boxes. The lid had shifted, exposing the edge of a large photograph. "What is that?" Before I answered, she pulled it free. The photograph was almost 30 years old. About 20 people stood outside a renovated brick industrial building beneath a temporary banner celebrating the opening of Riverside Exchange. I was near the center, younger by 3 decades, wearing a charcoal suit and standing beside several architects, city officials, and developers. Lauren stared at it. "That is you." I had more hair. She ignored the joke. "Why were you at the opening?" "Because I worked on the project." "You told me you worked around Riverside. You were in a hurry." Her eyes moved across the photograph again. "Who are these people?" I pointed toward a few faces. Some had retired. 2 had died. One had become a university dean. Another had spent years on the Charlotte Planning Commission. Then Lauren's finger stopped beside a younger woman standing several people away from me. "Is that Evelyn Brooks?" "Yes." Lauren looked at me sharply. "You know Evelyn Brooks?" I knew her. "Dad, she personally controls a major part of the project my firm is competing for. I am aware of what developers do." She stared at me, uncertain whether I was teasing her. I handed her the laser tool. "You should probably charge that tonight." But Lauren was no longer interested in the tool. She crouched beside the archive box and lifted the lid. Inside were roll drawings, photographs, project reports, and several old architectural journals. "Can I look at these?" she asked. "If you put them back when you are finished." She sat on the small bench beside my work table and began carefully sorting through them. I returned to the kitchen. About 20 minutes later, I heard the back door open. Lauren entered carrying the photograph and an old trade publication. Her expression had changed. "Dad." "What?" She placed the magazine on the table and opened it to a feature about the original Riverside redevelopment. There was another photograph of me standing beside a large site model. Lauren tapped the caption beneath it. "This says you were the lead design architect." I looked at the page. I had not seen that article in years. Apparently it does. "You did not just work on Riverside." "No." She sat across from me. "You designed it." "Not alone. Buildings like that are never one person's work." Lauren kept staring at the article. For the first time since she had asked me not to attend the dinner, she seemed to have forgotten how I dressed, what I drove, or whether I belonged in a room with people like Evelyn Brooks. She was looking at me as though someone had quietly replaced her father while she was not paying attention. Then she turned another page and found a photograph of the completed complex. Underneath it was a list of principal contributors. My name appeared first. Lauren did not leave with the laser measuring tool that evening. She sat at my kitchen table for nearly an hour, turning through the old trade publication as though every page might reveal another piece of a life she had somehow missed. "Lead design architect," she repeated. "Why did you never tell me that?" I took the seat across from her. "You knew I was an architect." "That is not the same thing." "It was never a secret." "Dad, I work in architecture." Riverside Exchange is discussed in preservation courses. Richard has used it as a case study in meetings. Nobody ever mentioned your name. That last sentence interested me more than the others. Nobody. Not that I remember. I nodded. Nearly 3 decades can make names disappear faster than buildings. Lauren opened her laptop and searched for Riverside Exchange. Most of the first results were recent articles about Phase 2. She changed the search terms, adding my name. Suddenly the screen filled with older references. Digital archives from architectural journals. A university. Preservation study. A newspaper feature from the opening year. A regional design award. Lauren clicked through them in silence. One article described how our team had converted 6 neglected industrial buildings into offices, shops, restaurants, and public gathering spaces while preserving most of the original brick structures. Another discussed the pedestrian courtyard system and the decision to retain small storefronts instead of creating a single enclosed commercial center. This says your design reduced demolition by almost 40% compared with the original proposal, Lauren said. The original proposal was wasteful. And you convinced the developer to change it. A lot of people helped. Lauren gave me an impatient look. You keep doing that. Doing what? Making everything sound smaller than it was. I smiled. Architecture is a dangerous profession for anyone who needs to feel individually important. A building requires clients, engineers, contractors, planners, tradespeople, inspectors, and sometimes one stubborn architect who refuses to move a wall. She almost smiled, but her attention returned to the screen. She found an archived interview where I discussed preserving the existing street grid through the development. Then she found another article crediting our team with solving a drainage problem that had threatened 2 historic structures. The more she searched, the quieter she became. Finally, she turned the laptop toward me. You received the Carolina Design Medal. Our project did. Your name is on the award. So were other names. You were 36. 35 when most of the work was done. Lauren leaned back. I could see her recalculating years in her head. She had been a little girl during the final period of my most active professional career. Her earliest memories were probably from the years when Margaret and I were already changing our priorities. Were you famous? She asked. I laughed. Architects have a very generous definition of famous. You know what I mean. I was respected in a fairly small professional circle. Evelyn Brooks knew you. She was a junior development manager when Riverside began. Smart. Persistent, and usually the most prepared person in the room. Lauren looked toward the garage. What else is in those boxes? Mostly paper that your mother refused to throw away. We went back outside. This time I opened the tool storage cabinet myself. For drawing tubes stood in one corner. Several project binders filled the upper shelves. Lauren pulled down a thick black portfolio labeled with the Riverside address. Inside were photographs of abandoned brick warehouses before construction began, hand-drawn site studies, elevation sketches, and meeting notes. She stopped at one pencil drawing of the central courtyard. I know this place, she said. You should. You had lunch there last month. No, I mean this exact layout. It is still almost identical. That was the idea. She traced the edge of the drawing without touching the graphite. You drew this? Yes. For the first time that evening, Lauren looked genuinely shaken. Not impressed. Not embarrassed. Shaken. She had spent years learning to produce sleek digital renderings, yet the neighborhood she was preparing to redesign had once existed as pencil lines under her father's hand. Then she noticed a gap in the archive. The material ended abruptly about 4 years after Riverside opened. Where is everything after this? She asked. There is not much. Why? Because I left. The project. The firm. She searched the next box and found another publication dated almost 2 years later. My name was absent. Then another. And another. The Riverside expansion proposals continued, but I was nowhere in them. You were winning awards, she said. You were leading major projects. Then you just disappeared. Professionally, more or less. Why? I closed the cabinet. That story is longer. I have time. You have a site inspection tomorrow morning. Lauren checked her watch and frowned. It was nearly 10. She reluctantly packed the portfolio away. Before leaving, she photographed several publication covers with her phone. I thought that would satisfy her curiosity for the night. I was wrong. At 7:30 the next morning, while I was making coffee, she sent me a photograph from the Riverside site. It showed the old central courtyard beneath the morning sun. Underneath, she had written only one sentence: "I am standing inside your drawing." I stared at the message longer than I expected. Then another photograph arrived. Lauren had found a bronze preservation plaque near the eastern entrance. My name was among those engraved at the bottom. By noon, she called. Her voice was different. "Dad, I searched the firm archives. You should probably be working. I found the redevelopment proposal from the year you left." I said nothing. It would have demolished almost half the original complex. "Yes. And there are meeting records showing you opposed it." "There probably are." Lauren lowered her voice. "The final memo says you resigned 3 weeks after the board approved the expansion strategy." She paused. "Dad, did you walk away from your career because you refused to let them destroy the project you had built?" "No," I told Lauren. "I did not walk away because I could not save Riverside. I walked away because there are some things you should not put your name on just because someone is willing to pay you." She was silent on the phone. I could hear faint voices behind her, probably members of the site team moving through the courtyard. "Then what happened?" she asked. "Come over tonight." Lauren arrived shortly after 7 with takeout from the neighborhood Italian place Margaret used to love. That told me she expected a long conversation. We ate at the kitchen table, and for once Lauren did not check her phone every few minutes. When the containers were empty, I brought one of the Riverside binders in from the garage. The original project was never supposed to be a luxury district, I told her. Those warehouses were surrounded by small businesses that had survived decades of economic changes. Repair shops, family restaurants, print shops, a bakery, a hardware store. The goal was to bring investment into the area without pushing everyone already there out of it. Lauren nodded. That is why the storefronts were kept small. Exactly. Smaller spaces meant smaller businesses could afford them. We preserved pedestrian access because people from the surrounding neighborhood actually used the site. We reused the brick buildings because their history was part of the value. I opened the binder to an old site plan. Then Riverside succeeded. And success changed the conversation, Lauren said. It usually does. Several years after opening, new investors wanted expansion. Their proposal looked impressive on paper. Larger commercial spaces. Luxury retail. Private offices. Structured parking. Higher rents. More revenue. The problem was that much of what made Riverside successful would have disappeared. I thought architects worked for clients, Lauren said carefully. We do. Then if the client wanted something different, was that not their decision? Ultimately, yes. But my signature meant I was professionally responsible for recommending what I believed was sound. A client can reject your advice. That does not mean you have to pretend you agree. I showed her one of my old sketches comparing the expansion plan with an alternative our design team had proposed. My version added density around the edges while protecting the central courtyard and most existing businesses. It would have made money, just not as quickly. The board chose the other plan, I said. I spent months arguing against it. Eventually I realized they wanted my reputation attached to a decision I did not support. So you resigned? Yes. Lauren looked down at the drawing. And then the expansion never happened. Financing collapsed about a year later. By then I was gone. She leaned back. You could have joined another major firm. I had offers. Why did you not? That was the question I knew was coming. I closed the binder. Your mother got sick. Lauren's expression changed immediately. Margaret's first serious diagnosis came when Lauren was 8. She recovered, then faced years of recurring health problems that changed the rhythm of our family long before the illness that eventually took her. Lauren remembered doctors, appointments, and periods when her mother needed extra rest. What she did not remember was the professional decision happening behind those years. I thought Mom did not get really sick until much later. The worst came later. The beginning came around then. I explained that one firm in Atlanta offered me a partnership. Another opportunity would have taken us to Chicago. Both meant travel, long hours, and starting over in cities where we had no family support. Margaret never asked me to turn them down. In fact, she argued that I should accept one. I declined both. Instead, I took smaller consulting jobs around Charlotte, then gradually reduced those as her health demanded more of us. You gave up your career for Mom, Lawrence said. No. That is exactly what you just described. I changed my career because our life changed. She shook her head. That sounds like the polite version. It is the accurate version. I leaned forward. Listen to me, Lauren. I did not lose my career. I chose what mattered more at the time. Her eyes lowered. And me? What about you? Was I part of that decision? Of course. She looked toward the living room where a framed photograph of Margaret still sat on the bookshelf. You never told me. What would telling you have accomplished? You were a child. You did not owe me repayment for being your father. Lauren became quiet. I knew what she was thinking because I could see the embarrassment returning, but now it was directed inward. She had spent years interpreting my ordinary life as evidence that I had never reached very far. The old pickup, the home repairs, the small consulting jobs, the modest house. She had mistaken the life I chose for the only life I had been capable of building. Dad, she said finally, about what I said before the dinner. You do not have to fix everything tonight. I was ashamed of you. I did not rescue her from the sentence. Some truths need to remain in the room long enough to be understood. I know, I said. Her eyes filled, but she remained composed. I am sorry. I know that too. She reached for the Riverside binder again. There is something else I do not understand. If Evelyn knew you, why did she invite you personally after all these years? You should probably ask Evelyn. Lauren looked at me. I might. 3 nights later, she walked into another private dinner for the Riverside project at an upscale restaurant in uptown Charlotte. I stayed home because this time I had not been invited. Around 8:30, my phone buzzed. Lauren had sent a message. Evelyn Brooks just asked me if I am Daniel Carter's daughter. A second message arrived less than a minute later. Dad, everyone at this table knows who you are. Lauren called me from the parking garage beneath the restaurant before she even started her car. Dad, why does Evelyn Brooks talk about you like you are some kind of legend? I could hear the embarrassment in her voice, but it was different now. 3 nights earlier, she had been embarrassed by me. Tonight, she was embarrassed by how little she knew. Evelyn has always been generous, I said. That is not an answer. How was dinner? You know exactly what I am asking. I smiled despite myself. Tell me what happened. Lauren exhaled slowly. The dinner had started normally. Richard Hale introduced several members of the Whitmore and Hale team to Evelyn and 2 executives from Brooks Urban Development. Michael Grant sat near Lauren, polished as always, discussing project schedules and construction costs. Then Evelyn noticed Lauren's last name on the seating card. Carter, she asked. Any relation to Daniel Carter? Lauren admitted I was her father. Evelyn apparently stopped the conversation long enough to look directly at her. Your father is Daniel Carter, she repeated. Before Lauren could explain, Richard leaned across the table. I have wondered about that for years. Lauren nearly dropped her water glass. Richard knew my work from early in his career. One of the consultants at the table remembered attending a lecture I gave on adaptive reuse. Another had studied Riverside Exchange in graduate school. Then Evelyn told Lauren that when she was a young development manager, I was one of the first architects who treated her opinions as seriously as those of senior executives. She said you taught her how to walk a site before looking at a rendering, Lauren said. That sounds like something I would say. She remembered the exact sentence. Then apparently I repeated myself. Lauren did not laugh. Dad, these are people I have spent years trying to impress. I know. And they were impressed that I am your daughter. I waited. Do you understand how strange that felt? She asked. Probably less strange than being asked not to attend the first dinner. Silence filled the line. I deserved that. I was not trying to punish you. That almost makes it worse. She told me Evelyn had asked why I was not there. Lauren could have invented an excuse. Instead, she said I had decided not to attend. Evelyn apparently studied her for a moment before changing the subject. Lauren knew she had avoided the real answer. I felt about 2 inches tall, she said. Good. Good? Not because you were uncomfortable. Because discomfort sometimes tells you something useful. She was quiet again. Evelyn said Riverside would not exist in its current form without you. That is overstated. Richard said the same thing. Richard was not there. He researched it after he realized who you were. I leaned against the kitchen counter. The whole situation felt slightly absurd. I had spent decades keeping my professional history from becoming Lauren's burden, and now that same history was sitting at a dinner table before her like an unexpected guest. There is something else, she said. Evelyn asked whether you had seen our preliminary concept. I saw a few pages when your folder fell. Did you look closely? No. Would you? That question mattered more than everything she had told me about the dinner. Do you want your father to look at it, or do you want the former Riverside architect to look at it? She hesitated. Both. Then bring it over this weekend. Lauren arrived Saturday morning carrying 2 large presentation cases and enough coffee for both of us. She spread the preliminary plans across my dining table. The work was polished. Beautiful, actually. Lauren had always possessed a strong sense of proportion. Her team proposed 2 glass office towers along the eastern edge, a luxury retail corridor through the center, underground parking, and a new event plaza. The renderings would look excellent on a presentation screen. What do you think? She asked. Do you want encouragement or an opinion? An opinion. I studied the site plan again. Where does Mr. Alvarez go? Who? I pointed to one of the existing storefronts. Alvarez Shoe Repair. Unless somebody else owns that space now. Lauren checked her tenant list. It is still there. And the bakery? Which bakery? Corner unit near the courtyard. She found it. Those leases would probably be relocated during construction. Where? That has not been determined yet. I moved my finger across the plan. What happens to the public walkway connecting the neighborhood to the transit stop? The new retail corridor replaces it. Not really. Your corridor closes after business hours. Lauren's expression tightened. This is conceptual. I know. The client wants higher revenue per square foot. Then your design probably accomplishes that. You do not like it. That is not what I said. You are doing that thing again. What thing? Making me drag the truth out of you. I looked at my daughter. It is elegant, efficient, commercially strong, and almost completely disconnected from the reason Riverside worked. She stared at the drawings. That is a pretty harsh assessment. You asked. What would you change? That is your job. She gathered the sheets more slowly than she had unfolded them. I could tell I had hurt her professional pride. I also knew she would think about every question I had asked. Before leaving, she stopped beside the front door. Our formal presentation is Tuesday. Then you have 3 days. We cannot redesign an entire proposal in 3 days. I did not tell you to. She left without answering. Tuesday afternoon, Lauren walked into the Brooks Urban Development Conference Room with Richard Hale, Michael Grant, and the rest of their presentation team. Their renderings were mounted, their financial projections were prepared, and Lauren had rehearsed every sentence. She told me later that the first 20 minutes went almost perfectly. Then Evelyn Brooks reached the site plan showing the luxury retail corridor. She studied it for several seconds and asked, "What happens to the people who are already here?" Lauren knew immediately what she meant. The questions that followed were almost identical to mine. Existing businesses. Public access. Historic circulation. Neighborhood connectivity. Lauren answered as professionally as she could, but each response exposed another assumption built into the proposal. Finally, Evelyn closed the presentation booklet. "You are showing me what Riverside could become," she said. "I need someone who understands why it survived." Lauren looked across the conference table at the project she had believed might make her career, and for the first time she understood that the problem was not whether her father approved of her design. The problem was that the client did not either. Lauren came to my house less than an hour after the presentation ended. She did not call first. I heard her car in the driveway, then the back door opened and she walked into the kitchen carrying the same leather presentation case she had guarded so carefully a week earlier. This time she dropped it onto a chair as if she wanted nothing to do with it. "How bad?" I asked. "We did not lose the project." She set her purse on the counter. "Not yet." "That sounds better than losing it." Evelyn gave us 10 days to submit a revised concept. "Then you have 10 days. Lauren stared at me. "Richard is furious." "At you?" "At everyone. Michael says the client changed the expectations after we started designing. Richard says we should have understood the development brief better. What do you think?" She pulled out a chair and sat down. "I think Evelyn told us exactly what she wanted. We just heard the parts that fit what we already wanted to design." That was the first encouraging thing she had said. I poured her coffee even though it was nearly 6 in the evening. She accepted it without complaint. "Michael thinks we should make minor changes," she continued. "Keep the towers, reduce the retail footprint, add language about historic preservation, and make the presentation sound more community-focused." "And you?" "I think that would be dishonest." I sat across from her. "Why?" "Because the design would still do the same thing. We would just describe it differently." I nodded. Lauren noticed. "Do not look so pleased." "I am not pleased." "You are absolutely pleased." "Maybe a little." She almost smiled. Then her expression became serious again. "I spent 9 years learning how to present architecture professionally. Yesterday I realized I have also spent 9 years learning how to make questionable ideas look convincing. That is not fair to yourself. Is it not?" "No. You are a good architect, Lauren. One bad proposal does not erase that." "It was not bad." "I agree. That is what bothers me." She leaned forward. "It was technically strong. The circulation worked. The financial model worked. The massing worked. The renderings looked beautiful. And somehow the whole thing was still wrong." I understood exactly what she meant. Some of the most dangerous mistakes in design are not obvious failures. They are solutions to the wrong problem. "Come with me," I said. We went into the garage. I opened the storage cabinet and pulled out 3 Riverside drawing tubes, 2 binders, and a battered notebook with a faded blue cover. Lauren cleared space on my drafting table. I unrolled the original site plan and held the corners down with old steel weights. "This is from before construction?" she asked. "Before the final design." The drawing showed the industrial complex as we first encountered it. 6 brick buildings, service alleys, loading areas, an abandoned rail spur, and surrounding neighborhood streets. Lauren leaned closer. "The courtyard is not here." There was no courtyard. Then where did it come from? I opened the blue notebook. Inside were notes from community meetings held nearly 30 years earlier. Business owners, residents, transit planners, city staff, people who lived within walking distance of the site. We asked people where they already walked, I said. Not where we wanted them to walk. Lauren turned several pages. These are interviews. Mostly notes. We spent weeks listening before we drew anything serious. One entry described an elderly shop owner who crossed the abandoned property every morning because it shortened his walk to the bus stop by almost half a mile. Another described restaurant workers using a service alley as an informal pedestrian route after late shifts. That path became the courtyard. Lauren asked. Part of it. I showed her a transparent overlay where several existing movement patterns had been traced across the site. The architecture followed the people. She studied it for a long time. We started with square footage. That is not automatically wrong. But we never asked any of this. Then ask now. She looked at me. We have 10 days. You can learn a surprising amount in 10 days if you stop trying to look like you already know everything. Lauren spent the next 2 evenings at Riverside instead of the office. She talked with store owners, maintenance workers, restaurant managers, and people waiting at the nearby transit stop. She called me after one visit and told me Alvarez Shoe Repair still opened at 7 every morning because commuters dropped off shoes before work. The bakery served employees from surrounding offices before most Riverside stores opened. The public walkway remained busy long after the retail businesses closed. Our plan would have locked that route at 9, she said. I know. Hundreds of people use it. Now you know too. At work, however, the disagreement was growing. Michael wanted to protect as much of the existing proposal as possible. Richard worried that a complete redesign could make the firm appear uncertain. Lauren argued that pretending the original concept only needed cosmetic adjustments would be worse. On Friday afternoon, Richard finally told both of them to prepare alternative approaches for an internal review Monday morning. Lauren arrived at my house that night carrying trace paper, pencils, photographs, and site notes. She spread everything across my old drafting table. I need help, she said. You have been helping yourself all week. I mean real help. I need to redesign this. Then redesign it. She pushed a pencil toward me. Show me what you would do. I looked at the pencil but did not touch it. No. Lauren frowned. You know this site better than anyone. That does not make it my project. Dad, my career could depend on this. Exactly. She stared at me, frustrated. You could solve half these problems in an hour. Maybe. And then whose architecture would you? Present. She looked down at the blank trace paper. I moved it back toward her. If I solve it for you, it becomes my project. You need to decide what kind of architect you want to be. For several seconds she said nothing. Then Lauren picked up the pencil herself. She placed a fresh sheet of tracing paper over the old Riverside plan and drew her first line. Lauren stayed at the drafting table until almost midnight. I sat on the other side of the garage with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, answering questions only when she asked them and refusing every invitation to take the pencil from her hand. At first, she worked the way she always had at the office. She drew boundaries, calculated usable square footage, and tried to preserve as much of the original commercial program as possible. After 20 minutes, she stopped and pushed the tracing paper aside. I am doing it again, she said. Doing what? Starting with the building instead of the people. She pulled out the notes she had collected during her visits to Riverside. She organized them by use rather than property value. Morning commuters. Restaurant employees. Small business owners. Office workers. Neighborhood residents. Visitors using the transit stop. Then she placed another sheet of tracing paper over the site plan and began drawing the routes those people actually followed. One line connected the neighborhood to the transit stop. Another crossed the central courtyard. Several converged near the bakery and the eastern entrance. Now you are seeing the site, I said. Lauren looked up. You could have told me to do this 3 days ago. You would have heard it as criticism. And now? Now you discovered it yourself. She rolled her eyes, but she kept drawing. By Sunday afternoon, the glass towers were gone. Lauren replaced them with 2 smaller additions positioned along the outer edge of the property, where new construction would disturb fewer historic structures. She preserved the central courtyard, kept the public walkway open around the clock, and reorganized the commercial spaces so existing tenants could remain during most phases of construction. The luxury retail corridor disappeared entirely. In its place, Lauren proposed flexible storefronts that could expand or contract as businesses changed. That will reduce projected rent, she said. Probably. Michael is going to hate this. Michael is not the client. Richard might hate it too. Richard is also not the client. She looked at me. You enjoy saying things like that. Age has benefits. Monday morning, Lauren presented the concept internally. She called me afterward. Michael thinks I have lost my mind. That seems dramatic. He says we are throwing away weeks of work. Technically, you are. You are supposed to support me. I support you. That does not make him factually wrong. She laughed despite herself. Richard had been harder to read. He questioned the reduced commercial density, construction phasing, and financial assumptions. Lauren answered most of his questions. When she could not, she admitted it instead of improvising an answer. That surprised him more than the design. He gave her 2 additional staff members and told her to develop the concept through Wednesday. Michael continued refining the original scheme as an alternative. For the next 3 days, Lauren barely slept. She worked at the office during the day and came to my garage at night. Not because she needed me to design anything, but because the old Riverside records contained information unavailable in the digital archives. Structural surveys. Original material specifications. Utility routes. Notes from contractors who had worked on the buildings decades earlier. I watched her compare those documents with current conditions and slowly build a proposal that belonged to her rather than me. Wednesday night, she showed me the revised courtyard plan. You moved the service access, I said. The restaurants need deliveries without blocking pedestrians. Good. That is all you have to say. Do you want applause? A little. I clapped twice. She threw an eraser at the table in front of me and laughed. It was the first time in years that architecture felt like something we shared rather than something she used to separate her world from mine. Then she became quiet. Mom would have loved this. She would have brought us food and complained about the mess. She would have told you to stop pretending you were not helping. Probably. Lauren studied the drawings. Did she ever regret that you stepped away? Your mother worried that I would. Did you? I considered the question. Sometimes I missed the work. That is different from regretting the choice. She nodded slowly. I think I have spent my entire career terrified of stepping backward. Most ambitious people are. That is why I cared so much about how everything looked. The apartment. The clothes. The people I knew. She hesitated. You. I said nothing. I thought if people saw where I came from, they might decide I did not belong. And where did you come from? She smiled faintly. A suburban house with a broken cabinet hinge and a father who apparently forgot to mention he helped design half the places I studied in architecture school. Not half. You know what I mean. Thursday morning, the team prepared the final revised presentation. Lauren's concept preserved more than 80% of the historic structures, retained nearly every existing small business location, maintained public pedestrian access, and added new office space without overwhelming the original complex. More importantly, every major design decision could be connected to something they had learned from the people who already used Riverside. Before Lauren left my house that morning, she placed the final drawings on my kitchen table. Tell me if it is good enough. For what? To win. I cannot tell you that. Then tell me if you would have designed it this way. I would not have. Her face fell slightly. I tapped the plan. Because this is not what I would have designed. It is what you designed. And that is the point. She looked down at the drawing again. Do you think it is good? Yes. Really? Really? She gathered the plans and headed for the door. Then she stopped and turned around. Dad, if we get this project, I want you at the next meeting. As what? She smiled. My father. That afternoon, Lauren stood before Evelyn Brooks and presented Riverside for the second time. This time there were fewer glossy renderings. And more explanations of how people actually used the place. When Lauren finished, Evelyn did not speak immediately. She slowly turned through the final pages, closed the presentation book, and looked directly at my daughter. For several seconds after Lauren finished, nobody in the conference room said anything. Evelyn Brooks kept one hand on the closed presentation book while studying my daughter across the table. Lauren later told me that silence felt longer than the entire presentation. Then Evelyn asked, "Who developed this revised concept?" Lauren glanced toward Richard Hale before answering. "I led the redesign with support from our project team." "And what changed your approach?" That was the question Lauren had been preparing for. She could have talked about market analysis, preservation strategy, or revised client objectives. Instead, she told the truth. "I realized we were designing for the future by treating the people already here as obstacles to it." Evelyn's expression softened slightly. "And how did you realize that?" "I started listening." Lauren explained the conversations with business owners, commuters, restaurant workers, and neighborhood residents. She showed photographs of the pedestrian routes people used every morning and explained why the public walkway needed to remain open after business hours. She described how the smaller storefront supported local businesses and how phased construction could allow most tenants to remain during redevelopment. When she finished, Evelyn reopened the presentation. "This is a very different project from the one you showed us last week." "Yes. That usually makes firms nervous." Richard answered before Lauren could. "It made us very nervous." Everyone laughed, and some of the tension disappeared. Evelyn turned to the page showing the preserved courtyard. "Your father used to say that the quickest way to misunderstand a site was to study it from a conference room." Lauren smiled. "He still says things like that." "Did Daniel design this for you?" The room became quiet again. Lauren shook her head. "No." "Did he advise you?" "He asked questions. Mostly uncomfortable ones." Evelyn smiled. "That sounds more familiar." Lauren then explained that I had refused to draw a single line of the revised concept. She had used old project records to understand the site's history, but every new design decision belonged to her team. Evelyn seemed pleased by that answer. Michael presented his alternative afterward. His proposal was professional and financially attractive, retaining much of the original commercial density while making several preservation improvements. Lauren told me later that Michael did a good job. That mattered because she no longer needed him to fail in order to believe she deserved to succeed. The meeting ended without a decision. 2 days passed. Then 3. Lauren called me several times but never asked whether I thought she would win. Instead, she talked about changes she wanted to make even if Brooks Urban Development selected another firm. She had started questioning how her office approached community research on every project, not just Riverside. Something had shifted that mattered more than a promotion. On Monday morning, Richard called Lauren into his office. Brooks Urban Development had selected Whitmore and Hale for Riverside Exchange Phase 2. Lauren called me immediately afterward. "We got it. Congratulations. There is more." Evelyn had specifically requested that Lauren serve as design lead through the initial development phase. The decision did not automatically make her design director, but it placed her in charge of the largest project she had ever managed. "How do you feel?" I asked. "Terrified." "Good. Why do you always say that?" "Because confidence is useful, but a little fear reminds you to check your assumptions." She laughed. "Richard said something strange." "What?" "He said the first proposal proved I could produce impressive architecture. The second proved I could change my mind when the evidence demanded it. That is a better compliment." "I think so too." A week later, Lauren invited me to the project kickoff meeting. I almost wore a suit. Then I decided that would be ridiculous. I put on a clean charcoal button-down shirt, dark slacks, and the same brown shoes I wore to church with Margaret years earlier. I drove my old Ford pickup downtown and parked beside vehicles that cost 3 times as much. This time, Lauren was waiting for me in the lobby. She did not look toward the parking lot or check whether anyone had noticed what I drove. She simply hugged me. Upstairs, Evelyn greeted me before I had crossed half the conference room. "Daniel Carter," she said. "You took your time." I was not aware there was a deadline. There was about 28 years ago. We laughed and shook hands. Richard introduced himself properly, although we had met briefly at conferences decades earlier. Several younger architects approached with questions about the original development. I answered what I could and corrected them when they gave me too much credit. Then Lauren walked over with Michael and 2 members of her design team. There was a moment when I expected her to introduce me as the original Riverside architect. Instead she said, "This is my father, Daniel." Nothing else. She did not need the credentials anymore. Neither did I. During the meeting, I sat near the end of the table and listened. Lauren led confidently without pretending to know everything. When an engineer raised concerns about service access, she asked questions. When Michael offered a better solution to one circulation issue, she gave him credit immediately. When Evelyn challenged a cost assumption, Lauren wrote it down instead of defending it automatically. I recognized something in her that had not been present during those first polished presentations. Curiosity had replaced performance. After the meeting, everyone left except Lauren and me. She stood beside a large printed site plan pinned to the wall. "You know what is strange?" she asked. "What?" 2 weeks ago, I thought getting this project would prove I belonged in that room. And now? Now I think belonging in the room means being responsible for what happens after everyone leaves it. I looked at the drawing. "That sounds expensive." She laughed. Then she pointed toward a new public plaza on the eastern side. "I changed this yesterday." "Why?" The original version looked better in the rendering, but it blocked the morning sun from the bakery. "Seating." I studied the plan carefully. "Your mother would have liked that." Lauren smiled. Because she loved bakeries. Because she spent 30 years trying to teach me that people matter more than drawings. Lauren looked toward me. Apparently I needed the same lesson. Several months later, construction planning was underway when Richard asked Lauren to meet with the firm's partners. She assumed they wanted a progress report. Instead, they offered her the design director position she had been chasing before any of this began. She called me from the sidewalk outside her office. "I got it," she said. "The job?" "Yes." "Are you happy?" There was a pause. "Yes. But not for the reason I thought I would be." That answer told me her career had already changed long before the title did. Lauren accepted the design director position 2 days later, but the first thing she did surprised Richard. She asked whether Michael could remain one of the senior architects on Riverside. "You were competing for the same position," I reminded her when she told me. "That does not make him bad at his job," she said. "He understands the financial side of these projects better than I do, and he challenged several assumptions that needed challenging." 6 months earlier, Lauren might have viewed another talented architect as a threat. Now she was learning that leadership was not about being the smartest person in every room. It was about building a room where the best idea had somewhere to come from. Riverside moved from planning into early construction the following spring. The historic brick buildings remained. Alvarez Shoe Repair stayed in its original storefront. The bakery relocated temporarily by less than 200 feet and returned after renovations. The pedestrian route to the transit stop remained open throughout most of construction because Lauren's team designed the phases around it instead of treating public access as an inconvenience. One Saturday morning, Lauren asked me to walk the site with her. We met near the eastern entrance shortly after 8. I wore work boots and an old navy jacket. She wore jeans, a hard hat, and boots dusty enough that I knew she had finally stopped worrying about looking polished every minute of the day. We walked through the courtyard where I had stood nearly 30 years earlier holding drawings that existed only as possibilities. "Does it feel strange?" she asked. "Seeing it change. Seeing me change it." I thought about that. No. Really? Buildings are supposed to change. Cities change. People change. The trick is knowing what should not be lost in the process. Lauren looked toward the storefronts. I used to think preservation meant refusing to move forward. Sometimes it does. Good preservation makes room for the future without pretending the past never happened. She smiled. "You know, that sounds suspiciously like advice about families. Architecture is useful that way." Near the central courtyard, we found Evelyn Brooks speaking with one of the construction managers. She greeted us and asked Lauren several questions about the schedule. Then she turned to me. "Daniel, are you satisfied?" "Not my project." That was not my question. I looked around. New structural work had been carefully inserted behind the historic brick walls. The public walkway remained exactly where neighborhood residents had used it for decades. Beyond the courtyard, Lauren's new addition was beginning to rise. It did not imitate my original design. It belonged to another generation. That was precisely why I liked it. "Yes," I said. "I am satisfied." Lauren pretended not to care, but I saw the smile she tried to hide. A few months later, Whitmore and Hale hosted a community presentation about the next construction phase. Lauren asked me to attend. There were developers, architects, business owners, neighborhood residents, and city officials in the room. Years earlier, that kind of gathering had been part of my normal life. Now I was content sitting in the third row. Before the presentation began, Lauren stood near the entrance greeting people. One of her younger colleagues approached us and asked how we knew each other. Lauren did not hesitate. "This is my father, Daniel Carter." Then she added, "He taught me almost everything that mattered before I was smart enough to realize he was teaching me." I looked at her. "That sounds expensive. You are never going to let me have one emotional moment, are you? Your mother handled those." Lauren laughed, but her eye softened when I mentioned Margaret. During the presentation, she spoke about tenant retention, pedestrian access, historic materials, energy efficiency, and long-term flexibility. She never mentioned my original design except when historical context required it. She did not borrow my reputation to strengthen her own. She did not need to. Her work stood on its own. Afterward, Richard approached me. "You must be proud." I always was. He seemed surprised. "Even before all this?" "Especially before all this. Pride is easy when your child succeeds. The difficult part is loving them while they are still figuring out what success means." That evening, Lauren came home with me for dinner. We ate at the same kitchen table where she had once asked me not to attend an industry event because she feared I would embarrass her. Neither of us mentioned that conversation until she noticed the old invitation from Evelyn still tucked beneath a magnet on the refrigerator. I had forgotten it was there. Lauren removed it and read it. "Why did you keep this?" "Your mother trained me not to throw away paper." She smiled, then became serious. "I wish I could go back and change what I said that morning." "I do not." She looked surprised. "Why not?" Because you changed afterward. That matters more. It still hurt you. Yes. I was not going to lie simply to make forgiveness easier. But people can hurt someone they love and still become better than the person who caused the hurt. Lauren folded the invitation carefully and placed it on the table. I thought you were an embarrassment because I thought your life looked too ordinary. My life is ordinary. You know what I mean. I do. She looked around the kitchen, at the repaired cabinet hinge, the old photographs, and the back door leading toward the garage where my drawings still waited in their boxes. I spent years trying to make sure nobody thought I came from something small. I shook my head. There is nothing small about building a life you can live with. Nearly a year later, I visited Lauren's office and saw a new Riverside drawing pinned above her desk. I studied it long enough for her to notice. What? She asked. Nothing. That means something. I pointed toward one section. I would have moved that entrance. Lauren examined it. I know. You know. I considered it and decided you would be wrong. I smiled. Good. That was the moment I knew she no longer needed my approval, my reputation, or my past to validate her future. My daughter once believed my ordinary life was something she needed to explain to successful people. Eventually, she discovered that the career she was so desperate to protect had been shaped by lessons she had watched her entire life. My secret did not save her career. It did something better. It forced her to decide what kind of career was worth having.